we've seen that when creating a new class, we should type in object in between parentheses when defining the class. We can say that the new class inherits from the class called object as a default. But for the sake of modularity and the do not repeat yourself best practice in Python, we can also create a class that inherits the attributes and methods from an already existing class. This is called class inheritance. In this case, the class inheriting the attributes and methods is called a child, and the class the child inherits from is called, you guessed it, a parent. To tell Python that you want to inherit from a certain class, you should type in the parent's name in between parentheses instead of object when you define the child. Let's see this. We still have the old class, myRouter, in memory from the previous lecture. This will be the parent. And let's see it. Now let's create the child and name it myNewRouter. So class myNewRouter, remember the camel case, inherits from myRouter because that's the parent, colon. Now about the double underscore init double underscore methods. You are allowed to skip the definition of an init method for the child class because the new class, myNewRouter, actually extends the myRouter class, and the init method is inherited from the parent. But what if you want to inherit all the attributes from the parent class and also define new ones in the child class? Then you are required to redefine the init method, tell Python that you want all the attributes in the parent to be available inside the child, and then enter new attributes. I will write the init method for this class and then I'll explain every bit of code. So, first I define the init method using the def keyword. Then in between parentheses, I pass the arguments as they are written in the parent class. So router name, model, serial number, iOS. But since I want to define a new attribute for this class, namely the number of ports, ports number, I added this parameter at the end. On the next row, I called the init method from the parent class by typing in the parent class name, so myRouter, then a dot, and then the init method, having the same old parameters in between parentheses as it has them in the class definition. I actually imported, so to say, the init method attributes from the parent class. Finally, I defined the new attribute, specific to this class only, called ports number. And that's it. Now I will define a new method inside this child class that simply concatenates a string given as argument when calling the method and the value of the model attribute inherited from the parent class. So let's say def print new router of self, don't forget the self word, and string, colon, and just print string plus self.model. Okay, now let's verify the inheritance process by first creating an instance of the child class. So let's say new router1 equals my new router, so the class name, and let's input some arguments. This is the router name, then we have the model 1-800. Now let's enter a serial number, then an iOS version, and finally a number for the number of ports. Notice that this time when invoking the child class, you should also add a value for the number of ports as the last argument. Okay, now let's see the attribute for the number of ports. So new router1 dot ports number. Okay, we got 10. This is correct. Now let's see if we can access the attributes from the parent class using this instance of the child class. So let's say new router 1 dot model. Okay, great. Let's also use iOS 12.2. Great. Now let's access the method from the parent class using the same instance or object. So new router dot print underscore router, and let's type in some random string. Okay. And indeed, the method inside the parent class is executed successfully. Nice. Now let's do the same thing with the method defined in the child class, called print new router. So new router1 dot print new router. Okay, another string, and this is successfully executed too. Two more things on class inheritance. First, a child class can inherit from two or multiple parents. The difference is that when you define the class, you should enter all the parents in between parentheses, like this. Let's say class, child class, and in between parentheses you enter the parents. So let's say parent1, comma, parent2, comma, and so on. I don't know, comma, parent n. And this is how you define multiple inheritance. The second thing I'll show you is a function that checks if a class is the child of another class. Let's use it with the classes we defined. The function is called isSubclass. Sorry. And first you type in the child class, so my new router, and then the parent class as the second argument, so my router. Okay, this will return true or false. In our case, it is true, obviously. I think you now have a pretty good idea about classes, objects, and inheritance. Of course, the object-oriented programming topic is much more complex and cannot be exhausted in just a few lectures or even an entire course. You can find a link in the additional section of this lecture with more information about classes.